It's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and I'm indoors ranking Animal Crossing games because that's just how I roll. Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of these spectacular tier list videos. Last time was a fair old while ago, but I talked about starter Pokemon, and we didn't get into any arguments, and I definitely didn't call one Pokemon Pignite instead of Emboar. I definitely didn't do that. Shouldn't have any problems like that today, because today we are ranking Animal Crossing games, which is a franchise that I have quite a lot of experience of. I've played every single game in the series. There's not that many games in the series, but frankly, it's widespread enough. There's enough difference between each game in the franchise that I feel fairly confident in passing some decent judgment and having some variety to the tier list rather than, you know, ranking like God of War games, but they're all pretty good. Like, there's no real variant in that, and if there is, it's like, oh, they go from S to B or S to C. You need a bad game in there to make it worthwhile for a tier list video, and trust me, definitely in there somewhere. And immediately, we come to an interesting decision, because what I usually do, if you're unfamiliar with how I do tier lists, is I start the video by putting my favorite, or what I consider the best game in S rank, so we kind of have a point of reference for everything else. So if everything's as good as that, it's going to go in S. Anything worse is going to be ranked down from there. My issue is that it's not New Horizons, because while I enjoy New Horizons, I don't think it's really captivated me in the same way as previous games have. Maybe that's a personal thing, that I just have too much going on in my life and I can't really get into the Switch version of Animal Crossing for a massive amount of time at a time. But I think I need to find it, because I think it's this one. I've got something in the way of my screen, so we have to go around it. But New Leaf. New Leaf is probably my favorite. We're going to put it in B to put it into S. And the reason why, it's kind of a bit petty, but I like New Leaf the most because it came out at a period of my life where I could play it a lot. I could invest time into it. I could get to know the animals in my village and to understand what they mean to me and all the little details. There's so many little details in New Leaf that not all of them have been carried over to New Horizons, and you know, that game gets fairly frequent updates, and they may happen over time, like they've already brought in diving and swimming in the sea and that sort of stuff. But I feel like New Leaf is the best balance of Animal Crossing. Of course, it hasn't got as many new ideas as New Horizons in comparison to what the franchise is and where it's come from, but I feel like this was a step in the right direction at a time when Animal Crossing kind of needed that, and it's there for a reason that I would happily go back to it. And my town hasn't been visited in like 4 years at least, and it's probably ruined, and there's weeds everywhere, but I would happily pick that up and play it. It's just, at the time, it was the perfect blend of things for Animal Crossing. It looks good, it plays good, you can carry it in your pocket, it's just kind of wonderful for that. So it's going to stay in S, and everything else is going to be compared from there on out. Which immediately brings us to Animal Crossing City Folk, or as it's known in the European region, Let's Go to the City, which I never really liked as a title. It was always a bit clunky. It implies that, hey, let's go to the city. I don't want to go to the city, you're going to have to do it anyway. So it's effectively this idea that you have your main town, and there's also a city you can go to, and that's basically the main selling point of the Wii version of Animal Crossing, which came out at a time when the popularity of the GameCube version, and I think the DS version came before that, was exciting. It was moving in the right direction. They just needed to do more of that, and there's a dog outside making too much noise when I'm talking about Animal Crossing. It's summer. There are many dogs outside. Most of them are being walked by their owners, but there's still makes too much noise in the background. City Folk is a good game, but it kind of suffers from a problem that a lot of Animal Crossing games suffer from, and that's it's much better as a handheld, because it's a game you need to play not quite every day, but you need to dip in and out of every single day, realistically, to get the most out of it. And it's not much of an issue to sit down and boot up your Wii and play some City Folk, but it's more of an effort to do so, and that means it's quite hard to, I mean, it's not hard to get invested in it. I got invested in it, but it's hard to sustain that for any reasonable period of time. So as a game, there's nothing really wrong with it. The city was a strange addition. It suffers from being on the home console, especially at a time when they had it on the DS as well, and we kind of saw what Animal Crossing on the DS was like, and it was kind of wonderful. So I'm going to put it in B. I don't think that's too harsh. It feels right. I forget like each individual game what was added, but I remember the general vibe around playing the game, and Animal Crossing City Folk or Let's Go to the City is good, but you know, other games did it better. Which brings us to the difficult question of Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've stated this a few times. I mentioned it in my best game of my best games of 2020 video. I do enjoy New Horizons. I don't currently play it. There was a point in time when it came out at March 2020, just as the world was starting to fold up into itself and all the problems were coming up, where it gave everybody a little bit of normalcy and said, okay, do you want to play with your friends that you can't really see right now? Buy Animal Crossing. It did incredibly well, sales figures wise, for the Switch. Buy Animal Crossing, play with your friends, catch some fish, you know, enjoy their company in a virtual setting that is kind of designed to be that way. Of course, Nintendo couldn't have seen the coronavirus coming, but they've still capitalized on it in basically the best way possible, and in a way that wasn't obvious that they capitalized on it. It's a good game. My issues are primarily that I can't really get into it. I don't know if it's just me. I don't want to be too harsh on it, so I'm not going to put it too far down, but I don't know if I've got too many responsibilities in life now, and I haven't really got the time or the energy to play it every single day. I don't play my Switch every single day. That's the issue. So a game like Animal Crossing is suited for some people, and the fact that it's a handheld means that you kind of get the blend of both worlds with Animal Crossing. I said from the start that Animal Crossing would be amazing on the Switch because, like, graphically it's right up there, and it's a handheld, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. But just for me, it doesn't really ring as well as other games do, and for that I'm going to go A. I can't really go any harsher than that. There's a few things missing in this game that they're going to add later, but I don't know if they omitted them just so they could add them later, so they had some updates they could fall back on. I don't know. It's fine where it is. It's just not going to touch New Leaf for me. Speaking of not touching New Leaf, you couldn't get further away from New Leaf with Amiibo Festival, and they didn't come out that far apart, maybe like 3 years, 2-3 years apart. I can't really talk about Amiibo Festival, it just makes me angry. It's immediately comparable to Metroid Prime Federation Force, but even then, they're very different games, and not just because they're different franchises, because Metroid Prime Federation Force was just unfortunate timing. They had an idea for a game, the game's quite decent, it's not terrible, it's quite decent, but it just came at a time when nobody really wanted to play it. They wanted to play a Metroid game, not a Metroid spin-off game. Amiibo Festival isn't even that. It's not even a good party game. So the fact that Nintendo unveiled it at E3 2014-15 and said, hey, it's an Animal Crossing game, but actually it's a party game, not the Wii U Animal Crossing game you've been wishing for so long, and also it's the dullest fucking party game you're ever going to play in your life. I just can't. The only real reason this game exists is you can buy Amiibo cards for it, and you can kind of use them in the game to kind of like, I don't even know, you can do stuff, and it's not that exciting. It is not a good game, let alone a good Animal Crossing game. So it's there. It really should be lower, but we have a D rank and it's gonna stay there. I don't like F ranks, and it just makes me mad. Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer. I have this game. I've never played it, but I know my sister has played it, and she quite enjoyed it. It completely changes what Animal Crossing is as a game. It's less like a life simulator, and more like the construction side of The Sims. Like, you're building houses, you're designing interiors, you're designing exteriors. You can kind of see some of the early seeds being planted for some of the features in New Horizons in this game. It's something I kind of always wanted Animal Crossing to do. It's just a strange dynamic, because it's not an Animal Crossing game, it's more of a, you know, interior, exterior design game, where you have to, you know, design houses to a brief. It's in the title, Happy Home Designing. You need to help design happy homes, and it's very odd to recommend it, because under that name, you have certain expectations for what Animal Crossing is and should be. Not in the same way as Amiibo Festival, which completely destroys that, but it's kind of a strange side grade for Animal Crossing, and it's not entirely terrible. It's quite good in a lot of places, so I don't really know how to describe it, how to put it in the tier list, because if it's like a general video game tier list, it's like an A rank, but if you want it as part of Animal Crossing, it's a bit of a strange game, so I'm going to put it in B, and just kind of forget about it, because it's just kind of confusing me, and I don't want it to. Animal Crossing Wild World. The one thing I can remember from this game, and it was a fair old while ago, it was like 2007, 2008, it was the idea of Animal Crossing on a handheld. It blew my mind as a child, because I played the original GameCube version, which was originally an N64 title, but by the by, Animal Crossing on a handheld was kind of life-changing and kind of game-changing for Animal Crossing. It was the template by which every Animal Crossing game would be judged, and when New Leaf came out, it was kind of like, is it as good as Wild World? Wow, it's actually a lot better in a lot of places. The one thing I can remember most vividly about Wild World in comparison to other Animal Crossing games, they had this whole thing with Celeste, who's Blather's sister, and you could do like constellations. It was a very interesting feature that didn't really go very far, but it was a fun thing that I remember this game having and then no game after it doing or really bothering with, so clearly they didn't really think it was all that great, but it was pretty damn solid for what it was. It's hard to judge, I might say this with everything, don't I, but it's hard to judge how I feel about it in comparison to New Leaf and New Horizons. That's kind of where I'm aiming at, because it is a very good game. I'm thinking that it's not as good as New Leaf. Is it as good or better than New Horizons? I would say, like, my general overview, it had Wi-Fi connection. That was pretty cool for 2007, 8 or whatever. I'm going to say it's an A, okay? Because I feel about it nostalgically roughly the same way as I feel about New Horizons now, and nostalgia tends to modify things to be better than they originally were, so that's the way they're going to be right now, because honestly, it's a good game. It's just hard to judge it compared to New Leaf, because New Leaf made so many improvements and additions, so it has to be a little bit worse, I suppose, and that's kind of what A's for. The original Animal Crossing, this is a dated game to play nowadays, but for a slightly different reason to City Folk, where it is on the main console line of Nintendo consoles, but it's also a different style of Animal Crossing. I remember, again, like the one thing I remember from this game is that once you paid your mortgage off, you got a statue out front, and the way that my family enjoyed this, every member of my family played it, my sister, my parents. We had, like, you had the 4 houses in like an X formation opposite each other. It was very interesting. And then you had a statue outside of your house based on how fast you paid your mortgage off. So I think it went gold, silver, bronze, and then like a greeny jade color for last place. And I prided myself quite a lot on being able to pay off my mortgage first. So that was a fun thing. It's the early stages of Animal Crossing. It's quite good for what it is. You can see why it was the stepping off point, or the jumping on point, or the improvement point. I don't know, there's a word in there somewhere. You can see why Nintendo believed that this franchise had enough potential to A, bring it to the West, because Animal Forest on the N64, which is kind of the same, or the same game, or a slightly different version, which isn't here, I don't really remember. Animal Forest was a game, and then Animal Crossing came out, and it was slightly better. Either way, this was the moment that they brought it to the West, and I remember my sister being very excited in like 2001 or 2 that she read it in a magazine that was coming over to the West, and she was very excited. So it is good. I don't really know where to put it. It's gonna be an issue, isn't it? I feel like there's a big gap between A and B, because Happy Home Designer is fine. I want to put it in B. Yeah, I think B's the best place to go, because it has aged a lot. You play the original Animal Crossing after playing New Horizons, you will notice things you cannot do in that game, and you know, there's a lot less fish and bugs. Was there even bugs? I don't even remember, but there's a lot of things missing. On its own, it's a good experience, but history hasn't been all that kind to it, and it will stay there for now. And then finally, we have Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, which I think is an odd game. It is an odd game. It's the Animal Crossing mobile game, if you're not quite sure how to place it or where to place it. I remember enjoying it for a brief period of time and thinking that it was quite a fun little mobile adventure for Animal Crossing. There's not a lot to do, but you're basically going around villages in like separate environments. I haven't played it for a long time, so maybe it's actually a bit different nowadays, but you go to different villages in different environments, and you solve problems for them and make your campsite more exciting with furniture, and like you can get KK Slider in there either as furniture or as a little stump where he will then occupy himself and play guitar for you. I don't know, but what I remember being the reason why I stopped playing it is that there wasn't really much to do. That might have changed now, but my experience of it is that there wasn't much to do. You basically get furniture and you get happiness points or something. You get currency and you get your furniture for doing tasks. And that's kind of it. There wasn't really a long-term goal in this game other than decorating your campsite. And the concerning thing is real-world money can be spent on this, so there kind of needs to be a goal, because my concern is that you'd have actual people spending actual money on something that doesn't really give you much satisfaction other than witnessing your camp being in some kind of working order. So it's not bad. It's just kind of innocent. Not even all that innocent. It's a bit dodgy because it's got real world money in it and the microtransactions, but it's just kind of a pointless little side thing. It's not as bad as Amiibo Festival. Few things in life are as bad as Amiibo Festival. I think C is a good place. It kind of rounds out this tier list quite nicely, and I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out. Pocket Camp, maybe I should play it again. Maybe I should download it and see how things are all these years later, but, you know, I'm not going to do that with Fire Emblem Heroes. I'm sure I'm not going to do that Pocket Camp. So yeah, what do you think? I'm pretty happy with that. I don't really know what I'd change. I'm kind of happy with where the console Animal Crossings are, because they are good games. They just have a very different dynamic to them, and if I was to have like an extra little tier to this without really affecting anything below it, I'd have like a B-, which is where Animal Crossing GameCube would go. It's fine. It's on the same level as City Folk and the very strange Happy Home Designer. It's just a bit less refined than City Folk. So I'm happy with how that's turned out. Do you disagree? Do you think that I'm talking shit about Animal Crossing? Because you're perfectly entitled to think that way. But also, what else should I talk about? What should I make tier lists about? I have a few rough ideas. Animal Crossing's been on the back burner for a little while because I wanted a smaller one to do at some point rather than do a 40-minute video on something like Resident Evil. I would like to, but not right now. I need to, you know, manage my time a bit better and then tackle something like that. But until then, until the next one, which may be next week, who knows, I will see you until I do the next one. Goodbye.